The city lights blurred past the tinted window of the black SUV like streaks of gold and crimson, painting the night in restless motion. Zohran Mamdani sat in the back seat, his long fingers pressed against the cool glass, watching families spill out of late-night diners, couples laughing under flickering halal cart signs, kids chasing each other across cracked sidewalks. Queens buzzed with the kind of life that never slept. Yet inside the car it was silent, too silent. His driver, a quiet man named Tariq, who had been with him since the campaign trail, kept his eyes on the road and his mouth shut. Zohran liked that. Silence was a luxury these days. He had won. That was the word everyone kept using. Won. First Muslim mayor of New York City. First African-born. First South Asian. The headlines screamed it from every corner of the internet, every bodega television, every subway ad. Historic upset. The people's champion. The man who froze rents. Who stood on the steps of City Hall and promised halal school lunches for every kid. Who stared down billionaires and said, "Not in my city." The crowds had roared his name until their throats gave out. His mother had cried into his shoulder on election night, her hijab damp with tears of pride. His phone had buzzed for weeks with messages from strangers who said he had given them hope. But tonight, as the SUV crawled through the familiar streets of Astoria, Zohran felt none of it. The victory tasted like ash in his mouth. Fame had brought him everything anyone could dream of: money, power, adoration. But at that moment, a hollow ache gnawed deep inside his chest. He had spent years giving to others, surprising tenants with rent relief, crashing eviction courts, handing out turkeys at Thanksgiving, sharing his platform with the voiceless. He had poured himself into the fight until there was nothing left for himself. He sighed heavily, his broad shoulders sinking into the leather seat, as if weighed down by an invisible burden. Despite the towering presence that once made him a force in the assembly, he felt small. A few miles away, in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the edge of Astoria, 6-year-old Aisha danced across the living room like a tiny whirlwind of joy. She twirled in her faded kente cloth skirt, the colors of Uganda bright even in the dim light of a single lamp. Her laughter echoed off the peeling wallpaper, filling the cramped space with magic. Her mother, Fatima, watched from the kitchen, smiling as she stirred a pot of lentil stew on the stove. The scent of cumin and garlic drifted through the air, warm and comforting. "Be careful, Habibti," Fatima warned gently, her voice warm but firm. "I don't want you slipping on the rug again." "I won't, Mama," Aisha promised, though her twirling only grew faster. She didn't notice the scuff marks her old sneakers left on the floor, nor did she care. In Aisha's world, the little apartment wasn't small or modest. It was a palace of possibility. Fatima wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the window, looking out at the dimly lit street. The weight of bills and endless work hours rested heavily on her shoulders. She worked double shifts as a nurse at Elmhurst Hospital, often skipping meals so Aisha could have hers. But no matter how hard life got, she had made one promise to herself. She would raise Aisha to be kind. "Kindness will take you further than anything else," she often told her daughter. And Aisha, with her big brown eyes and a heart full of love, took those words seriously. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Aisha crawled into bed beside her mother. She looked up at Fatima with sleepy eyes and whispered, "Mama, can we help someone tomorrow?" Fatima chuckled softly, brushing a curl from Aisha's forehead. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Someone who's sad." "Like you say, kindness can help people, right?" Fatima's heart swelled with pride. "Yes, my love. Kindness can do amazing things. Now sleep, and we'll see what tomorrow brings." As Aisha drifted off, Fatima stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had so little to give, yet Aisha's pure heart reminded her that even small acts could make a difference. Back in the city, Zohran sat alone in the sprawling mayor's residence at Gracie Mansion, staring at an old photograph of his father. The man had been his rock, his guide, his anchor. "Keep your feet on the ground, son," he had always said, "no matter how high you go." But somewhere along the way, Zohran had lost touch with himself. Now, despite the cheering crowds and constant demands for selfies, he felt like a stranger in his own life. He placed the photo down and leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. He knew he couldn't go on like this. Something needed to change. Little did he know, a tiny apartment and a little girl with a big heart were about to change everything. Zohran Mamdani sat at his kitchen table in Gracie Mansion, staring at the travel brochures scattered in front of him. Each one displayed images of quiet retreats, small towns, cabins tucked away in the mountains. He traced a finger over one brochure, his eyes lingering on a photo of a community garden in Astoria, his old district, surrounded by raised beds and murals. It wasn't like him to run away. For years, Zohran had faced challenges head-on, whether it was in the assembly or on the campaign trail. But this time, he didn't feel like fighting. He needed a break. After some thought, he made his decision. He'd take a few days in Astoria, incognito. No cameras, no crowds, no noise. Just peace. He'd visit the community garden he had helped fund years ago, sit on a bench, and remember why he started. A week later, Zohran found himself in the familiar streets of Astoria, far removed from the chaos of City Hall. The streets were lined with halal carts and bodegas, the tallest building the local mosque with its green dome. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and newcomers were rare. Zohran kept his head down as he walked through the small grocery store, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses. It wasn't easy for a man of his recognizable face to blend in, but the locals seemed to respect his space, offering polite nods and quick smiles without lingering. He spent most of his days in solitude, walking through the community garden or sitting on a bench by the raised beds. The quiet was a welcome change, but the loneliness persisted. One sunny afternoon, Zohran sat on his usual bench in the garden, his large frame hunched over as he stared at a wilting tomato plant. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing through the air. But he felt no inclination to join in. His thoughts were heavy, swirling with doubts and regrets. "Why does it still feel like something's missing?" he muttered under his breath. Across the garden, 6-year-old Aisha was skipping beside her mother Fatima. They had come to the garden to enjoy a rare day off together, with Fatima carrying a small picnic bag filled with one homemade shawarma wrap and a bottle of juice. As they passed the raised beds, Aisha stopped abruptly, her gaze fixed on the man sitting alone on the bench. "Mama," she whispered, tugging on Fatima's hand. "That man looks sad." Fatima followed Aisha's gaze and saw Zohran, his shoulders slumped, a heaviness about him that even she could sense. "He's just sitting there, sweetie," Fatima said softly. "Maybe he's just tired." "No," Aisha insisted, her voice filled with conviction. "He's sad." "I can feel it." Fatima knelt down to Aisha's level, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "What do you want to do, Aisha?" Aisha hesitated, glancing at the picnic bag. "Can I give him my shawarma?" "Maybe it'll make him happy." Fatima's heart ached at her daughter's generosity. Money was tight, and every bite mattered. But she couldn't say no. "Okay," Fatima said, her voice soft. "Go ahead, but be polite." Aisha beamed and grabbed her shawarma, skipping over to the bench where Zohran sat. Zohran didn't notice her at first. He was too lost in his thoughts, his eyes fixed on the wilting plant. "Excuse me, mister," the tiny voice startled him. He looked up to see a little girl standing in front of him, holding out a slightly squished shawarma wrap. Her big brown eyes were full of kindness. "What's this?" he asked, his deep voice gentle but surprised. "It's for you," Aisha said simply. "You look sad." "My mama says shawarma can make people feel better." Zohran blinked, taken aback by her honesty. He stared at the wrap for a moment before reaching out and taking it. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. That's really nice of you. Aisha smiled, her innocence shining through. It's okay. You're welcome. I hope you feel better soon. Before Zohran could respond, Aisha skipped back to her mother, who was waiting nearby. He looked down at the shawarma in his hands, a lump forming in his throat. It was such a small gesture, but it had cracked open something inside him, a warmth he hadn't felt in months. As Aisha and Fatima left the garden, Fatima glanced back at Zohran. He was still sitting on the bench, but this time he wasn't hunched over. He was sitting up straighter, the shawarma resting in his lap. You did a good thing, Fatima said, squeezing her daughter's hand. Aisha grinned. I just wanted him to smile. And for the first time in a long time, Zohran did. The next morning, Zohran Mamdani woke up in his borrowed Astoria studio with the taste of cumin still on his tongue. The shawarma wrap had been gone in 3 bites the night before, but the feeling, that stayed. He lay on the narrow futon, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying the moment over and over, the little girl's tiny hand, the squished foil, the way her eyes didn't flinch from his sadness. He had faced down billionaires in boardrooms, stared into the flash of 1,000 cameras. But nothing had ever looked at him like that. Not with pity, not with awe, just seeing. He sat up, rubbed his face, and caught his reflection in the chipped mirror above the dresser. The fake beard was gone, the hoodie tossed on the floor. For the first time in weeks, he didn't look like the mayor. He looked like a man who had been given something he didn't know he was starving for. Across the garden fence, Aisha was already awake. She stood on the kitchen stool in her pajamas, helping Fatima wrap another shawarma, this one for her school lunch. The apartment smelled of garlic and yogurt, the radio playing soft Ugandan gospel. Aisha's tongue poked out in concentration as she folded the foil. Mama, she said, not looking up. Do you think the sad man ate all of it? Fatima smiled, wiping her hands on her scrubs. I hope so, Habibti. That was your whole lunch, Aisha shrugged. It's okay. He needed it more. Fatima's heart did that familiar flip, half pride, half ache. She kissed the top of Aisha's curls. You're something else, you know that. By noon, the garden was alive with weekend energy. Kids chased soccer balls between the raised beds. An old Dominican man watered his tomatoes with a coffee can, and Zohran, hoodie back on, cap low, was on the same bench, pretending to read a newspaper he wasn't seeing. He told himself he was just checking on the plants, but his eyes kept drifting to the path where Aisha had appeared yesterday. And then she did. She came skipping in with Fatima, a new picnic bag swinging from her shoulder. This time, there were 2 wraps. Aisha spotted him instantly. Her face lit up like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Hi, mister, she called, waving so hard her whole body wiggled. Zohran folded the newspaper, a smile tugging at his mouth before he could stop it. Hey, kid. Aisha marched right up, Fatima trailing behind with an amused, wary look. Did you like it? Aisha asked. The shawarma? Zohran leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Best thing I've eaten in months. Maybe ever, Aisha beamed. Mama puts extra love spice in it. That's the secret, Fatima laughed softly. It's just a little extra garlic, Aisha. No, Aisha said seriously. It's love. Garlic is just the messenger, Zohran chuckled, the sound rusty but real. Well, the messenger did its job. Aisha tilted her head. Are you still sad? The question hit like a dart. Zohran opened his mouth, closed it. Fatima's eyes flicked to him, curious, kind, but not pushing. I'm better, he said finally. Thanks to you. Aisha nodded, satisfied. Then, without warning, she grabbed his hand. Come on, Mama brought 2 this time. One for me, one for you. Zohran let himself be pulled to his feet, Fatima had spread a blanket under the shade of a young fig tree. She patted the space beside her. "You're welcome to join us, mister?" "Just Z," he said quickly. "Old nickname." They sat. The blanket was small. Zoran's knees stuck out comically. Aisha handed him a wrap like it was a sacred offering. He unwrapped it carefully, steam curling up. The first bite, lamb still warm, yogurt tangy, a kick of harissa, made his eyes water again. Fatima watched him. "You eat like someone whose forgotten food can be joy." Zoran swallowed. "I think I had." Aisha, mouth full, mumbled. "Mama says joy is like shawarma." "You gotta share it or it gets cold." Fatima ruffled her hair. Out of the mouths of babes. They talked. Not about politics or headlines. About small things. How Aisha wanted to be a nurse, and a mayor, and a superhero. How Fatima once dreamed of medical school but chose motherhood instead. How Zohran, Z, used to run marathons just to feel his lungs burn and know he was alive. Aisha tugged his sleeve. "Do you have kids?" Zohran shook his head. "No. Work got in the way." Aisha considered this. "Work is important. But so is swinging." She pointed to the playground. "Come on." He hesitated. Fatima smiled. "Go." Doctor's orders. So Zohran, 6 foot something, mayor of 8 million, let a 6-year-old push him on a swing. The chains creaked. The sky spun. Aisha's laughter rang out like bells. For 10 minutes, he wasn't anyone's symbol. He was just a man flying. When they returned, Fatima had packed up the picnic. Aisha hugged his leg. "See you tomorrow, Z?" Zoran's throat tightened. "Yeah. Tomorrow." That night, he didn't go back to the studio. He walked the long way home, past the mosque, past the halal cart, where the owner nodded like he knew something. He bought a tea, stood under the awning, and watched the city move. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was performing. The next day, he was back at the bench before noon. Aisha arrived with a drawing, stick figure Zohran with a giant shawarma, labeled "My Friend Z." Fatima brought iced mint tea. They played clap games. Aisha taught him a Ugandan rhyme. He taught her how to say rent freeze in 3 languages. Fatima laughed until she cried. Days blurred. Zohran's hoodie became a fixture. He learned Fatima worked nights at the hospital, that Aisha's father had died when she was 2, that they lived on rice and hope. He learned Aisha collected bottle caps and believed they were fairy coins. He learned the sound of Fatima's tired laugh when she thought no one was listening. One afternoon, Aisha asked, "Z, why do you always wear that hat?" He touched the brim. "Hiding from the sun," she squinted. "Or from people." He didn't answer. She didn't push. Then came the magazine. Fatima sat at the kitchen table after a 12-hour shift, feet aching, flipping through a dog-eared copy of New York Magazine someone had left in the nurse's lounge. She turned a page and froze. There he was, Zohran Mamdani, in a sharp suit, arms crossed, the headline screaming mayor of the moment. Same jaw, same eyes, same man. She stared until the photo blurred. Aisha was asleep on the couch, clutching her stuffed lion. Fatima's hands shook as she closed the magazine. She didn't sleep that night. The next day, she didn't bring a picnic, just the magazine, folded to the cover. Zohran was already on the bench, Aisha chasing a butterfly nearby. Fatima approached slowly. "Z," she said quietly. He looked up, smiled, then saw her face. The smile faltered. She held out the magazine. "This you?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then he took off the cap. The fake beard was gone today. He hadn't bothered. The face on the cover stared back at him. "Yeah," he said. "That's me." Fatima sat beside him. Aisha, oblivious, kept chasing the butterfly. "Why?" Fatima asked. "Why hide?" Zohran exhaled. "Because out there, I'm a headline. A symbol, a threat. Here, I'm just Z." The guy who likes your daughter's terrible drawings. Fatima laughed. A real one this time. They're not terrible. They're abstract. Aisha ran over, breathless. Mama, the butterfly flew away. Fatima pulled her close. Aisha, meet the mayor. Aisha blinked, looked at Zohran, looked at the magazine. Her mouth formed a perfect O. You're famous? She whispered. Kind of, Zohran said. Aisha studied him. But you still ate my squished shawarma. That's why I ate it, he said. Because it was yours. Aisha considered this. Then she hugged him, arms barely reaching around his waist. You can be famous and still be Z. Zohran's eyes stung. He hugged her back, careful, like she might break. Fatima watched, tears slipping down her cheeks. That evening, Zohran walked them home. The apartment was smaller than he expected. Peeling paint, a leaking faucet, but warm. Aisha showed him her bottle cap collection. Fatima made tea. They sat on the floor because the couch was full of laundry. Aisha yawned. Z, will you come tomorrow? Try and stop me. But tomorrow came with a storm. Zohran arrived to find the garden gate locked. City maintenance. Aisha wasn't there. Fatima's shift had been extended. He waited 2 hours, then 3. The sky cracked open with rain. He stood under the awning of the bodega across the street, soaked, watching the empty path. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Fatima. Aisha's fever spiked. Elmhurst, ER. I'm scared. He didn't think. He ran. The hospital was chaos. Beeping machines, crying babies, the smell of antiseptic. He found them in a curtained bay. Aisha lay pale on the bed, IV in her tiny arm. Fatima held her hand, eyes red. Zohran's heart stopped. What happened? Dehydration, Fatima whispered. She wouldn't drink after giving away her water bottle to a homeless man yesterday. Said he looked thirsty. Zohran sank into the plastic chair. Aisha stirred. Z, she croaked. I'm here, kid. She managed a weak smile. Told you, kindness is like a circle. He took her other hand. Yeah. You win hours later. The fever broke. Aisha slept. Fatima leaned against Zohran's shoulder, exhausted. You didn't have to come, she said. I did, he said. She's my friend. Fatima looked at him. Really looked. You're not what I expected, Mayor. Zohran, he corrected. Just Zohran. Outside, the rain stopped. Inside, something shifted. The man who had everything had found the one thing he couldn't buy. And the little girl, who had nothing, had given him the world. One shawarma at a time. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beep of the monitor and Aisha's steady breathing. Zohran Mamdani sat in the corner chair, hoodie damp from the rain, watching the rise and fall of her tiny chest. Fatima dozed beside the bed, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled, one hand still wrapped around her daughter's fingers. It was past midnight and the city outside the window had finally slowed, just for a moment. Zohran couldn't leave, not yet. He had texted his chief of staff hours ago. Emergency. Clear my morning. No details, no questions asked. For the first time in his political life, he wasn't thinking about optics. Aisha stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy but bright. Z, she whispered. He leaned forward. Right here, kid. She smiled weakly. Did the butterfly come back? Not yet, but it will. Aisha nodded, satisfied, and drifted off again. Zohran stayed until the sun crept through the blinds, painting gold stripes across the linoleum floor. When Fatima woke, she found him asleep in the chair, head tilted at an impossible angle. She touched his shoulder gently. You should go home, she said. You look like you haven't slept in days. I haven't, he admitted. But I'm not leaving until she's discharged. Fatima's eyes softened. You're a good man, Zohran Mamdani. He shook his head. I'm just catching up. 2 days later, Aisha was back in the garden, weak but determined, pushing a toy stroller with her stuffed lion inside. Zohran was waiting with a folding chair and a thermos of Fatima's mint tea. He had brought something else, too. A large woven basket covered with a kente cloth. Aisha's eyes went wide. Is that for me? For both of you, Zohran said. He lifted the cloth. Inside, fresh halal chocolates shaped like tiny mosques. A child-sized cricket bat with Aisha the Legend engraved on it. A bolt of bright kente fabric for Fatima. A set of fairy coin bottle caps in a glass jar. And, tucked beneath it all, a plain white envelope. Fatima's breath caught. Zohran. He knelt, so he was eye level with Aisha. You gave me a shawarma when I had nothing to give back. This is me trying to say thank you. Aisha pulled out the cricket bat and swung it experimentally. I'm gonna hit a home run! Fatima opened the envelope. Her hands trembled as she read the number on the check. Enough to pay off the medical bills. Enough for rent for a year. Enough for Aisha's future, college, dreams, all of it. She looked at him, tears spilling. This is too much. No, Zohran said firmly. It's not even close. Aisha hugged his legs. Does this mean you're my fairy godfather now? Zohran laughed, the sound deep and real. Something like that. That night, Fatima sat at the kitchen table with the check in front of her like it might vanish. Aisha was asleep, cricket bat clutched like a teddy bear. Fatima wrote a letter on the back of a grocery receipt because it was the only paper she had. Dear Zohran, you gave us more than money. You gave us hope. Aisha says kindness is a boomerang. It always comes back. You proved it. We will never forget. With love, Fatima and Aisha. She slipped it under his studio door at dawn. Zohran found it when he woke. He read it twice, then a third time. Then he folded it into his wallet, right next to his mother's old prayer card. The next week, everything changed. Aisha returned to school with a mission. She stood in front of her first-grade class, cricket bat in one hand, a foil-wrapped mini shawarma in the other. My friend Z says kindness is like shawarma, she announced. You gotta share the spice. By Friday, 20 kids had joined the Shawarma Kindness Club. They made wraps with their parents, wrapped them in foil stars, and handed them out at the subway station to anyone who looked tired. A homeless veteran cried when a 5-year-old gave him lunch and said, You fought for us. Now we feed you. The story spread, first on neighborhood WhatsApp groups, then on TikTok, then on the local news. Zohran watched it unfold from City Hall, stunned. A clip of Aisha went viral. Kindness isn't a policy, it's a recipe. The comments flooded with heart emojis and Ugandan flags. He called a press conference, not in the Blue Room, but in the Astoria Community Garden. Cameras rolled, kids in Shawarma Kindness Club t-shirts, hand-painted with puffy paint, stood behind him, holding foil-wrapped bundles. Zohran stepped to the microphone. No notes, no teleprompter. I came here to hide, he said, voice steady. I thought I needed silence. Turns out I needed a 6-year-old with a squished lunch. Laughter rippled through the crowd. She didn't know I was the mayor. She didn't care. She saw a sad man and gave him her only meal. That's the New York I want to lead. Not the one with the biggest budget, but the one with the biggest heart. He turned to Aisha, who stood front and center, cricket bat over her shoulder like a rifle. This city freezes rents. We build housing. We fight for the many. But today, we launch something bigger. The Shawarma Kindness Initiative. Every public school cafeteria will offer free halal wraps once a week. Every community fridge will be stocked. And every kid who joins Aisha's club gets a stipend to keep the ripple going. The crowd erupted. Aisha raised her bat like a champion. That night, Zohran went live on Instagram from the garden. No filter, Just him, Aisha, and Fatima under the fig tree. "Tag someone who needs a wrap," he said. "We're delivering tomorrow." The requests poured in. A nurse working triples. A subway conductor with diabetes. A drag queen who'd lost her venue. By morning, volunteers had made 500 wraps. Zohran delivered the first one himself, to the bodega owner who'd given him tea in the rain. Word reached the national networks. CNN called it the shawarma revolution. The New York Times ran a photo of Aisha on the front page, foil star in hand. Caption: "The Mayor's Muse." But the real magic happened in the quiet moments. One evening, Zohran found Aisha in the garden, sitting alone on the bench where it all began. She was drawing, tongue out in concentration. "What's this one?" he asked. She held it up, stick figure Zohran and Aisha, holding hands with a giant shawarma floating above them like a sun. "For your office," she said. "So you remember." He took it, throat tight. "I'll frame it." Fatima joined them, carrying a fresh basket. "Dinner," she said. "But this time, you're eating with us every night." "No arguments," Zohran smiled. "Yes, ma'am." Months passed. The Shawarma Kindness Club grew to 2,000 kids across the 5 boroughs. They didn't just feed people. They listened. A teen in the Bronx started a homework club in a laundromat. A senior in Staten Island taught crochet to veterans, every act traced back to one squished wrap. Zohran changed too. He still fought in City Hall, still stared down developers, but now he ended every speech with the same line: "You don't need a ballot to change the world. You just need a little spice and the courage to share it." 1 year later, on the anniversary of the first shawarma, Zohran hosted a citywide iftar in the garden. Thousands came. Halal carts lined the streets. Kids in foil star hats ran between tables. Aisha, now 7, stood on a milk crate with a microphone. "This is for Z," she said. "Who taught me that mayors are just people, and people can be kind?" She handed him a new drawing. The two of them, older, standing on the Brooklyn Bridge, shawarmas in hand, the city glowing behind them. Zohran took the mic. His voice cracked. "I came here broken. You fixed me with lunch. Now look what we built," the crowd chanted. "Shawarma! Shawarma!" Fatima pulled him into a hug. Aisha jumped into his arms. Cameras flashed. But for once, Zohran didn't care. Because in that moment, he wasn't the mayor. He was Z. And the ripple? It hadn't stopped. It never would. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Storyboot for more upcoming heartwarming stories like this.